Welcome to the Soul Sisters series, where you'll get thought-driven, inspiring topics for your soul with Vaughn Solis and Brenda Rachel.
Okay, so welcome to part 11 of Soul Sisters, as we may have said in part 10. I can't quite remember, but we just decided to do episodes as we feel like it and add it to this playlist for your enjoyment, for your learning, for your healing, for inspiration. So welcome to the Soul Sisters series. I'm Vaughn.
I'm Brenda.
And together, we are the Soul Sisters. We're also real life blood sisters. And this whole series is dedicated to us sharing with you how we survived our trials and tribulations from different experiences. Brenda with fibro, myself with bereavement, the loss of my daughter, Janaea, in 2005 to suicide when she was 22. So we have come from the same family dysfunction, and a lot of it, which you'll learn about in any of the earlier episodes, 1 through 10. Each one, we focused on a specific area to expand consciousness. And I think that even while we're talking, my consciousness gets expanded.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, mine too.
Yeah. So I re-listen to our episodes 2 or 3 times as I edit and do the transcript and so on. And then you listen to it. Mm-hmm. And we decided together that this is pretty good stuff. And, but the true, evidence of our teachings, both as authors, angel healing practitioners, coaches, and in whatever other way we offer our work to you, it is precisely our work that we have lived by, dedicated ourselves to the principles of it, to heal and get ourselves very comfortable in life, right? Living life on our terms, the way we want to live our life.
Exactly. Yep.
And I just want to throw in here before we get into today's topic, which is all about the smorgasbord of suffering there is no end to on this planet, whether we're really here to suffer, to gain entry into God's kingdom, or otherwise develop a very evolved consciousness and return to the omnipotent, the source. Whatever we believe, the idea of suffering to earn our way out of something that in the human body we're trapped in, into something that is more reverent, if I can say that word, a more reverent, absolutely, more divine, more whatever. So the question is, we're going to be talking about that today, sis. Do we really come here to suffer? And all the ways you can suffer, of course, we're not going to be going through all of them, just to say that, there is a smorgasbord. Remember the day we were having chai and we were just talking about it and kind of going, well, it's a smorgasbord out there. Heck, whatever you want. So you can go through anything and turn it into suffering, or it is actual suffering that we don't choose to really be in, but due to our very human makeup, we suffer, such as loss and anything else that would be traumatizing or very impacting in a suffering way, which I will define as something that is lasting, according to the dictionary. It is lasting. It ends, it causes us undue grief for an extended period of time, and considered to be a suffering. We're also going to talk about, when is it time to let it go? Mm-hmm. And I think we're only going to have time probably to touch on that, and I think we're going to probably circle back to letting go in the next episode, which we've already got planned for you, and how to do that. It's a process, and give you some ideas. So let's jump into it, sis. This part 11, smorgasbord of suffering and when to let it go, being the topics we're going to talk about. So I'm going to open up with, we were talking just ahead of the recording, it just like a whoosh came to me before you arrived, the Bible verse. And I am not proficient in the Bible, so I did look it up. So it's Matthew 19:14 from King James Version. And I'll quote it directly. It says, "But Jesus said, suffer little children and forbid them not to come unto me, for of such is the kingdom of heaven." So that's the Bible verse. But what was interesting about what came to me is Brenda and I were raised Baptist until we weren't. And we both went into, well, you went into, you can explain what church did you go into?
Oh, I went into a variance of churches, but Science of Mind, and to become a Science of Mind minister.
Right. And I went into Unity, and that both churches have a very metaphysical, spiritual, what would you call it? Like foundation, I guess.
Well, I think principles.
Yeah. But the difference is I don't know if it's a difference. I don't know if Science of Mind references the Bible at all, but Unity certainly had a Christian component to it, referenced the Bible, but took a lot of those passages and expanded on them so that we would feel more empowered and things are possible and we are that spark of God and so on and so forth. So it was a perfect blend for me because maybe more than I like to care to admit, that Baptist upbringing until we were, well, basically adolescents, no longer for you, had an influence.
Yeah.
And you were quite religious.
I was very religious. Yeah, my whole youth revolved around something at the church.
Right.
Youth group, CGIT, whatever.
Right. So as we like to say, I spent my donation money on candy on the way to Explorers, which was an offshoot of the, CGIT, Canadian Girls in Training. And Brenda, of course, she probably donated and built a huge fund for the church. Probably. Not a story. May these be forgiven. But anyway, a little, aside to the difference in our personalities. We shan't go any further about the crimes I may or may not have committed in my youth. Okay, let aside from the personalities, we'll say past. Our past. Okay, fair enough. I ran pretty much with a very adventurous crowd and left home just as I was turning 16. And so my path was definitely different. But I'd like to say I always kept myself out of trouble.
Yeah.
But it does speak to that fiery personality and not wanting to bend to authority and all that kind of stuff. Mm. And you were a little bit more restrained.
I was the absolute devout rule follower.
I thought you were going to say angel, actually. I was not really devout angel.
You probably were. To a certain degree.
Yeah. So bringing it back, so there I am, and this thought comes to me, suffer little children come unto me. That was the part I remember. So as I was getting my thoughts together for today, and this really, I don't know if it's an important topic, but the more you suffer, and the more you don't want to suffer, but you don't know how to get yourself out of it. So in my case, the loss of Janaea, my bereavement. I'm 19 years in it now. I did start to question it. Is this my lot in life? Am I going to be tortured like this? And especially in the first several years of my grief. And bereavement, because they're two different things. Grief is what you feel from the bereavement. Bereavement is the loss. The grief is how we react to the loss, which can last a lifetime for a good number of people. So I didn't want to do that. So right from the time she died, from the earliest, I would say weeks and for sure months, right? The pain was so severe for me, and you know that. And that's when we went down 9 months into it to train as angel healing practitioners. And I went to California for that. And so we really took it seriously and did the whole thing and came back and founded practices, the part-time and, in our respective ways. So dedicated, point of that is we both dedicated ourselves. My understanding, you came to help me, to support me.
I came to support.
It wasn't more like, I gotta go. And I have to go and do this.
Right.
And so bless my sister, you didn't want me to go alone. And rightly so, because I was very, very timid and, was just afraid of the world. And so you were sort of the huge pillar for me through this whole experience. But anyway, the point I want to say is that already I'm starting to think about this notion of, one, I can't suffer the rest of my life. I wouldn't be able to bear that. And two, do I really need to? This is not what Janaea would want for me. And many people who are suffering the loss of a loved one, that it has impacted them in such a way that they are suffering horribly, right? I believe that the majority of them, if not all of them, understand that their loved one in spirit doesn't want us to suffer.
Right.
And if you ever go look at YouTube, mediums, and, first thing the medium will say, and these are not mediums that are we're all gifted, actually, by the way, to be mediums, channels for people in another dimension, okay? Which is just around us, just vibrating higher. We all have that gift, and I learned that from James von Prague when I trained under him in 2015. And so it isn't, they're talented, and, people pay a lot of money to go to people to basically hear they love you and they want you to be happy. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, and you might get some other messages. And I'm definitely not dissing mediums at all, people who have that gift of mediumship, because I studied under one of the world's well-known, if you're in that circle, James von Prague, for a week, and learned a lot. And James taught me, as part of the 100 of us that were there, to think of it as being a channel, and you're offering an amazing gift to someone who doesn't believe they have that skill themselves, right? I'm just even going to call it a skill. It's not even a gift. So anyway, and as an aside, a lot of people that were at that week-long training, they didn't even really know what it was about. So they were shocked when they found out that they were there to learn how to be a medium. What? And found that some of them, because we paired up all week with each other, some of them were the best ever. Oh, they were talented. My God. So anyway, I'm just saying, we're not our loved ones on the other side. The key message is they don't want us to suffer. So then what the heck are we suffering for? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to turn it over to you. What do you think? So I'll just say, we'll go into the next thing. So just on that point of, do you think, we're going to expand on this, but actually I want to just get right now your sort of views on what suffering is to you. And just very broadly, do you think that most people think that we have to suffer on this planet to gain entry into that omnipotent, that God's kingdom, that wherever that's going to end the suffering for us?
Okay, well, really interesting. I've never really thought about that. And so I can't answer for anybody else on this planet. But
that's what you think.
But I definitely don't believe that. Although I was raised in a Baptist church that would have had that as a principle, because we followed what was taught in the Bible, etc.
So do you think, having not really thought about it though, that you may have believed that based on the teachings of your Christian upbringing?
Yeah, I would have adopted it if I don't consciously remember that particular concept being taught to me. I do absolutely recall the verse from the Bible. I'll just say for myself that I believe grief and suffering are not the same with my physical impairments. So I suffered intensely through my pain, but I wasn't in grief.
You have suffered in this life. Oh, I agree with that.
Oh, tremendously, emotionally and physically.
Okay. So let's keep it to your personal experience of suffering. And while you were in your suffering, maybe you would like to share with the audience who maybe haven't seen some of our earlier episodes, where did this suffering come from for you? When did it start? And briefly, like what made you suffer?
Well, I think my very initial first suffering was dealing with mom's suicide attempts and the absolute devastation that I was going through. And about the emotional pain that I was in, that I couldn't do anything for mom. And also that I had to be there for you guys.
Yeah.
And my siblings, which was my sister and 2 brothers. And didn't know, I took on at some level the responsibility that maybe I had done something wrong for her to want to leave.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So just to really recap, so our mother, whom we loved dearly, let me put a picture of her up in the video for those who are following us on video.
Yeah, and just to interject, she passed at 78, so she did live.
Yeah.
She didn't die early.
Oh, yeah, she didn't die early. But by the time I was 10, so by the time you were basically 14, we're almost 4 years apart, she had 5 attempts to end her life, which we did talk extensively about this in an earlier episode. I'm sorry, I do not remember exactly which part, but it will be in the show notes. And we were greatly impacted, as many people are, by childhood trauma, but didn't understand it as childhood trauma.
Right.
We weren't raised with the term suicide, but just killed herself.
Yeah.
Attempt to kill herself. So if you really think about it, as a young child, and our brothers were in between us, one would have been, 12 when the attempts ended through her being admitted to a mental institution, quite frankly, for a couple months, 2 or 3 months. And then a younger brother. All 4 of us were greatly, greatly impacted by that, largely because no one talked about it. We weren't really informed about what was really going on. And we just never knew if we were going to have a mother.
Right. Right.
So you took that on, and our age difference, the fact that we have that age difference between us, and you're the oldest, naturally basically got hit with all the responsibilities. And I'm like, la, 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 just as I've said in another episode, just not understanding why I can't have my friends over. Right? That, and the biggest thing, the underlying, so there's always in childhood trauma, this vibration of trauma in our cells, our DNA that's going on, that you don't feel safe. It's suffering. So you're right. We suffered right from childhood.
Oh, yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. And for me, it started at probably age 4. You were just born. So 3 and And when she had her first suicide attempt. And so then there were several others all the way through. But at age 8, I vividly remember that was the first time that I took on the household responsibilities, and with the cooking and laundry and stuff like that, and looking after you guys.
See, and I don't even remember it.
Yeah.
So that in and of itself is probably must impact you in some way when you did all that, and the kids don't even remember.
Well, and I think too, it was I was really Mom and I were really close, and I adored Mom, and I just didn't understand what I did wrong, why she didn't want to be there.
But I think that's a normal. I want to say, for those of you who are in the bereavement, we can be suffering in many lanes, but for the purpose of this series, I'm bereavement, Brand's disability, to cover all these areas. But they cross over, and there's many other types of suffering, and grief comes from anything that hurts us and leaves us in pain. That's grief, as far as I'm concerned, based on my extensive experience with grief as a bereaved mom. And it's kind of I think you can feel this way if you've been abused as a kid. And, whenever we've been really hurt, abandoned, betrayed, traumatized, all these things that happen just from a loss, well, they happen to us even getting fired from a job. So let's just leave, no matter where you're coming from, audience, what kind of experiences, this is not this show isn't for you unless you've lost a child or suffered with some disabilities. No, This is for you if you share any of the feelings, emotions from whatever experiences that we talk about, and then how to get yourself out of that. At least get yourself started on the route of healing, the path of healing. So, so that's huge. And I'm going to wager a lot of those feelings, unless you know what you're feeling, and in any childhood dysfunction, we don't know. We don't really know. Subconsciously, and at that higher soul level, we know exactly what we're feeling. As like I'm talking about our spirit soul self. But as that little kid, you don't know. But what I was going to say is you're feeling responsible, and you did something that, would make mom not want to be here. Right. That is, I think, a very, very common reaction from kids, that they're responsible for their mom and dad's divorce. They're responsible for anything that's gone wrong in the family. And because kids don't yet generally talk to the other siblings about that abuse, right? They take on and shoulder that. They can do that throughout their whole entire life. But I also want to say to those of you who are bereaved parents, it's very, very common for surviving children to feel that they should have been the one that died, because of the depth of unhappiness and suffering the parent is now going through. And hopefully there's more work on it. I read one book back in 2005 that made me aware of it right in the first 2-3 months. And it was a general book on grief written by a psychologist. It was not specific to bereaved parents. And boy, did that save me, because I would never have understood in a million years that my son actually felt that way. And so when he one day told me that, because I wouldn't stop crying, well, maybe I should have been the one that died, and he's 13, I immediately, whoa, that's what that psychologist said. And becoming aware of it allowed me to not let that fester in his little 13-year-old mind, which, by the way, festering can start in little 2-year-old minds and younger. And certainly, so you're feeling that at 8, that what's she doing wrong? I'm 4, and no idea that Brenda's feeling that you're feeling that. So we're carrying different things. Just think about the trauma in the world, folks, all from stuff that is not talked about, is pure suffering, and not explained properly if it is talked about. Right. God, I think it's just, on me at a very young age, like I said, to take on everything, all the responsibilities for my siblings and the basic household things, which was a lot. There were 6 in our house, but and I loved doing it. So it wasn't like did you? Oh yeah, I loved doing it. So that wasn't an issue. Because I came here to help. I've always been a helper in some form. Wanted to help people or whatever, offer assistance wherever I can. And so that was innate in me. And it wasn't like against kind of the human condition or my comedic makeup that I came here. I've always been a helper. And so anyway, I'm just saying that for my own suffering with my physical illnesses, it was my physical illnesses that then I got into my own suffering, and but it wasn't in grief. You're aware. I would say that your own side thing, that it was suffering on top of suffering, but where you became aware of suffering, because I don't really think we talk about suffering very much.
No, we don't. And so and I also think that it can be associated. Grief and suffering can be compartmentalized in the same compartment, and they're really not the same. Mm-hmm. Suffering is one thing, and grief is something completely different. Yeah. And so, and I'm not going to get off.
No. I mean,
that kind of thing, right?
Basically, we can suffer from anything. We can be in grief from anything, but you can be in grief and not suffer. Yeah. So we lost our mom. Yeah. I did not suffer that loss. Okay, it was a shock for sure when she died at 78, very unexpectedly, heart issues. And so I wouldn't even say I was necessarily, I might have been traumatized. I was just shocked, but it was nothing like the suicide of my daughter, which did propel me into long-term suffering. It would have been a life of suffering had I not decided to look at suffering and understand your grief. Suffering. I was in grief, but like I said, I was in grief over mom, but I didn't suffer. It wasn't prolonged. It wasn't, okay. And prolonged grief disorder is now a disorder in the DSM-5. Look it up if you want. Became a disorder a couple years ago and is literally defined as grief that is persistent, excessive grief or complex grief for 1 year or more. And you have memories. And anyway, they give you, I don't want to get into it, but they give you the bullets, if it were, of what would constitute prolonged grief disorder. But it became a mental disorder. I have it, by the way, as most bereaved parents, if not all of them, have it. And maybe suicide survivors of any type of relationship loss, that they are a suicide loss survivor. So, again, it's very interesting. That's suffering. Any disorder is a suffering of type. It's impacting our life in such a way that we cannot enjoy our life, essentially. So, for the purposes of this particular episode and this series, when I talk about suffering, for me, that's what I'm referring to. Something that is so deeply embedded in me or others that we cannot get past the pain of it. It is very disruptive to our life, our relationships, our ability. We could lose our identity from it. It has completely changed our experience on this planet. And we're not happy people. We're in pain because we are suffering from whatever it is. And so for you, if you're considering, are you suffering? Are you not suffering? It could be from anything. It could be from chronic illness. They're suffering. It's in any way that the enjoyment of life, this is my definition of it, the enjoyment of life has literally been ripped from us and what we knew. And somehow we have to rebuild ourselves and find a way to not suffer. So in other words, embrace joy and embrace those things that would make us feel content and safe and secure and, have our happiness. And as they say, you can't sustain happiness 24/7, but you can certainly have a positive disposition and view and tackle life, which is what we talk about in all our episodes, from a more positive, solution-oriented disposition. I won't even say lens. I'll just say disposition. That is how I roll. And, but it, and that's how you roll, but it doesn't mean that we don't encounter things or haven't had deep pains and suffering. But I'm so glad we talked just a smidgen about the childhood impact of the trauma, because it's so important to understand that impact on us as kids. One of my least favorite sayings is children are resilient. And I always say, actually, no, they're not. They all grow into us as adults. So we might get through it as children and because we don't understand what's really happening within our bodies. But as this screwed up, dysfunctional adult, which there's plenty of that to go around, choosing from this smorgasbord of suffering on the planet, okay? That, and if it comes from childhood, all of that has been in our DNA, being in our cellular structure, being in our mind, our makeup, our everything. And we may or may not have an experience or become curious about it and want to do something about it when we're adults. Right. So for someone, in my opinion, that does not go through childhood trauma, because I guess there are some people out there, and if you're one of them, yay, that's amazing. But I've always sort of felt that if you skip it and you don't have to deal with it as a kid, it'll bite you in the butt somewhere in your life. Not necessarily the suffering, but something's going to get you. Every one of us is going to experience a loss at some point, unless we're the first to go.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, all I can say is as my suffering for me started with my fibro.
Yeah.
When I was in my physical pain.
Yeah.
And it was very, very difficult.
Yeah.
And I was told at the age of 42 that I would end up in a wheelchair. So that sort of set me off into a downward spiral into severe grief.
Yeah.
Because I knew that I had no health left.
Yeah, the loss of health, folks. Think about that for a minute, the loss of health.
Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but is there very much information out there about grief from loss of health?
Oh my gosh, I haven't looked right up, and I would think probably not.
I'd say probably not.
Yeah.
So when we lose that, so you suffered. So share, if you'd like, what the suffering, because you had physical suffering, mental suffering, emotional and spiritual suffering. It impacted you.
Yeah.
Always, because you literally couldn't move.
Correct.
You went to work, you said, and would come home and basically writhe on the floor in pain.
Yeah.
After caring for your animals.
Yeah. Until I couldn't work anymore. And I was pretty much always on the floor or in bed. And so life as I knew it, from being very active. Yeah, very, very active, because this was the early 90s, but I had been paddling whitewater rafting since 88. And I did a trip in the early 90s to up in Alaska for 12 days.
Was it Alaska or Yukon?
Oh, yeah. It was Yukon and Alaska.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
She went by herself.
I went by myself.
I mean, with a group, but still by herself.
There were 12 of us, a 12-day trip down the amazing rivers.
Amazing.
It ends up in Alaska, but I can't remember. We started in Yukon. But anyways, because we met in Whitehorse. But in any event, yeah, that was an amazing 12-day trip. And I did that in 92.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 94 to 96, where I really got fibro right after that, was diagnosed. I already had it. I had it since 79, but didn't know.
Yeah. So getting diagnosed is another big piece
to
understand our suffering.
Yeah.
Right? We can suffer and not know what that heck from.
Yeah, no. Because for me, I always had quote unquote a bad flu, very bad flu. But I would be off 5 days from work, and other people would be off 2 to 3. And it was seriously ill. And anyways, when I finally was found a new doctor, and when he referred me to a rheumatologist, and then did tests, etc., and actually gave me a diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
And the prognosis, like I said, would end up in a wheelchair.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as I read that, I instantaneously went into a state of grief.
Yeah, for sure.
Because
your life sort of feeling like, I'm sure it's slipping away or going to slip away from you.
No way. I had no health. No capacity to use most parts of my body. And they're in intolerable pain like I've never, ever felt in my life, ever.
Right.
So in any event, from that point forward, after I tried to commit suicide and didn't die, then and that set me on that, and that I would say culminated from extreme suffering and deep depression and grief.
Mm-hmm. So let me jump on that point.
Yeah.
So when you found that out, did you? Pretty sure you didn't blame God, because we're not into blaming God.
No,
but
I didn't,
or anyone.
I didn't blame anyone.
But no, but did you question why you would be on the planet and suffering like this?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So talk about that. What were you asking about suffering, and what were you sort of
Well, I felt
concluding about it?
Well, I felt at that juncture, because I'd already had started my ministerial studies through my Science of Mind church, and I was just taking preliminary courses for 2 years, like a couple of classes each semester to get to move into the actual practitioner training.
Mm-hmm.
So I already was very committed to becoming a minister. And so I knew I had a purpose, but what I questioned was, why was I ill when I absolutely believed that we came here perfect, whole, and complete?
Yeah.
And I was nothing but a shell. I was becoming nothing but a shell. So the conflict was between what I knew I was as a true vessel from God on this planet, which was perfect, whole, and complete. And the outer picturing was nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing like that. So it was a complete dichotomy or what I say, dichotomy?
Well, sure. Yeah.
Like, they don't mesh here, girl.
Yeah.
And also, I was really starting to question, but not to the point that I would have ever given it up. Like, my value system, my belief system, my training, all of that. I thought I'd come too far. That this is real.
So this is from the Science of Mind Church, remember? So this is already metaphysical. We're now not dealing with just a Bible and heaven and hell.
I really believed in the Science of Mind treatment, where through prayer treatment of the 5 steps of prayer treatment in Science of Mind, that I could heal my body. I had the capability with my beliefs to heal my body. And yet there, for me, was no energy. I had no energy to invest in doing anything anymore. So
a lot of this is, I'm going to ask you if you thought you deserved to be suffering.
Well, that didn't enter my mind. I never felt that I was being punished by God.
Okay.
Or that I had done anything to myself. I also had not yet adopted the principle that I create my own reality.
Oh, you weren't there yet.
I wasn't there yet.
Okay.
But to the point where I believed I could heal myself. So that's creating my own reality, but not in the words of like, I could create. I believed that I create my own reality in every aspect of it. Right?
Yeah. So that would be illness. You had created the illness, but you weren't quite there yet.
No.
So
I knew I could heal myself. But I didn't know that I had come into the understanding that I had created the illness.
Okay. You were on the cusp, I guess, of finding that. So, because when you don't believe that, like, before you adopt, if you do adopt the what is sort of from a self-responsibility, knowing your truth and, all of that kind of stuff in a spiritual practice, right? It is that we create our reality, all the good, all the not good. And once you adopt that for your life, and we are not here to tell you to do that. No, for me, it makes life a lot more interesting and more tolerable. It gives you autonomy over how you want to live. And it allows you or invites you to go back and revisit these things that have not been pleasant in your life. But anybody who's on this path already has a growing toolbox. You don't just do it without the tools. We've already surrounded ourselves by, or with a community of like-minded people, have read books. You were studying to be a minister. We're very, involved in your Science of Mind church. And even though it can take years to kind of refine, and probably should take years to refine your spiritual practice and your truth of your life, because your life keeps going on and keeps surprising you in many ways. And the goal, I guess, is always to become one flame, one spirit, one soul. That's my goal, to have that all merge. We're very balanced with the human at my point of transition. That's my ultimate purpose on the planet, despite what's happened or because of what's happened in all my experiences. And I think it's that element of curiosity that helps us go back and revisit the childhood stuff when we've been hit with a major like event, like such as Janaea taking her life. Okay, that superseded anything else. Childhood trauma, I don't need to deal with that right now. I need to deal with this. This is the one that's actually threatening my life. It's threatening my ability to survive. If you don't get hit with anything that severe, then, and before I got hit with that, I was on a wonderful, beautiful spiritual path from the time of age 25. So I was 48 when she died. So I was on the path, I guess, for 23 years. And I was already like you. I was very well rooted in understanding there's no blame. I wasn't as probably, this is my reality, this is my creation. Intellectually, I got it. But living with that took me a little bit of time to not understand that it was my creation. But why? Why would I create this suffering in my life? And so that's 19 years ago. And I've had plenty of time to evolve and explore and be curious about that and what that means for me in my life, which turned into the body of work that I now share with others for any like-minded people or people that want to learn and follow that kind of thinking and have that manifest as the truth for them in their own life, in your own way. All we do in our work and certainly on this series is we just share our stories. And this is what, and we like to, we like to share our stories and invite you to just think about some of the stuff we talk about that, quite frankly, just even like today, we're just bandying things around. And well, what do you think? What do you think? We don't have the answers, but it's the questioning that helps us find answers that make sense for us and what we've been through individually, that when we allow ourselves to do that and heal just a little bit, for me, it makes like the incarnation, the life, like worth it. Okay. And you can see I'm hesitant, because worth it doesn't sound quite right, but certainly that I can value the suffering, I can value the lessons, I can learn from the lessons and understand that I've chosen them, those lessons, I've chosen for some reason. And I don't exactly have the whole picture yet, because I'm not sure we get the whole picture until our transition. I'm just not sure about that. And whether we do, whether we don't, other people, who may or may not be watching this or listening to this, but in their own track, and, they figure they have the answers for everything, more power to you. I have been as perplexed at various stages of this bereavement by different things and to varying degrees. Much more deep thinking. It's invited much more deep perspective in me that probably, hopefully, is helping me refine this experience to the point I chose to have it, to the point I chose to be conscious of all those things I wanted to learn in this lifetime as I transition. That's really what I think. I talked a bit about that in Soul Healing in part 10. And I know it sounds really convoluted because I'm working it out, but I really believe that I became aware of the suffering as illusion, which I'm going to pop into in a minute here. So I definitely knew I was suffering, but it also took me a few years to understand the difference between suffering and just being bereaved and in grief. I really had to, really kind of explore, like, this is not going away. And after making myself wrong for many, many, many years about why don't I have it together? Like I see other bereaved parents have it together. So I can truthfully say 19 years later, and even many years ago, I understood that none of us have it together. People just put on faces to be public and so on and so forth. But deep down, I met so many people years and years and years into their bereavement that they can get taken down in a second by a trigger, just like me. But we just don't stay down as long. So what that means is the pieces of that suffering from whatever we have experienced that has caused us to suffer, they're still there even as we heal. And so that makes me question, do you think we can ever really, really get over the suffering? Like all of that stuff built in deep within us.
Yeah, well, I think I absolutely can't.
Just for yourself.
Yeah, for any other individual. But I know for me, it gives me a great sense of, what's the word? Relief, knowing that I am the master of my destiny.
Yeah.
And so that it is nobody else's duty to enable me to heal from whatever is going on in my life, right? And so all of my situations and a sense of freedom. It's a wonderful sense of freedom, knowing that I'm the one who, through my thoughts, can create what I want to have happen in my life.
Right.
So upheavals, challenges, my absolute falling off the wall things when they happen out of the blue, and I have my little outbursts at home and stuff like that. It's very freeing knowing that I have exactly the same amount of energy that I can put into that side of the coin or flip the coin and have it become a much more positive experience.
Right.
And it's nobody else's responsibility to fix anything that's going on in my life.
So here's a question for you about suffering, keeping it to suffering. So you suffered, your health declined. We're not going to talk about it today because earlier episodes are filled with how we both got out of our intense suffering. And I do want to just clarify about triggers and long-term effects for triggers and things that can just, whoa. So just as an aside, today I was working on a coaching episode I'm going to be releasing. And I pointed in them, in that episode, I'm pointing to a meditation I have on my YouTube channel. It's a meditation channel. And I thought to myself, geez, you haven't done that for a while, because I created this channel in 2017, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm going, oh man, I mean, is the recording any good? Like, whatever. And so I thought, okay, just check it, listen to it. And anyway, it is releasing pain with the angels. And so I decided, I decided I'll just listen to it and do it. I ended up going, just do this. And it brought me to tears. It brought me to tears because the words that I was using were being channeled to me at that time through the angels. And it's a healing meditation with Archangel Michael, Azrael, and Raphael. And so the point I want to make of that, and I'll put a link to it even in this episode, because that channel, the Living Meditations, that was the next phase of the work I was doing at that time, which was meditation. Podcasting was not like for me, even in my consciousness at that time. And I was working on the a re-release of my book, Divine Healings, the 2018 version. And I had so much fun doing all the meditations. And they were there and they serve a person per purpose, and they have their audience. But the ultimate was to accompany each of the meditations that are in the book, Divine Healing. And that's what they do. And so listening to it, once you get over like, oh, your voice could have sounded better and things like that in the opening, blah, 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 it's not about that. It's about the impact of choosing to want to heal from suffering and not let it get me down and not ruin it for the rest of this life. And also being very motivated by understanding Janelle doesn't want me to suffer, right? Right. And while she suffered on the planet, and I do not ever speculate as to why she took her life, I don't know. She didn't leave a note. No idea. So anybody could say anything and make it about mental health problems or this or that. I have no idea. I just know she looked like an angel in her death. And a policewoman told me at the scene, She had never seen anyone look more beautiful in death. So that meant she died peacefully, even if it was at her own hand. And I didn't need to worry at least about that. But going back to this meditation, the reason I'm talking about this today and why I did it this morning, and at first I was a little fidgety, and then I went, you know what, just give into this and do it.
Good.
And it made me cry. And the reason it made me cry is because all the areas, and what focuses on different areas of your body where you're feeling pain and stuff like that, and targeting them, and you go through the meditation and then revisit and see how the areas are doing. And I just honored and respected, okay, girl, the heart's still broken. It's still broken. I don't know how to totally fix it. And I don't know if I need to totally fix a broken heart, but I certainly can, like you're saying, manage. And what I was saying earlier about the autonomy, I can certainly decide when and how I want to be very, like how I want to be experiencing that deep, deep pain that, in this case, the meditation allowed me to be fully in touch with, to understand it's still there. And so your fibro, we talked in a few episodes ago about how you've had a little, well, I don't want to say little, but a return of it.
Yep.
A return.
Yep.
So not, I didn't want to impose on them, but you're okay with me saying that. Mm-hmm. So when you think about suffering and you get out of it for years, you had some other things go wrong and stuff like that. But before talking about the fibro recurrence, in the in-between years, you're faced with a life of suffering, you go through some stuff, and then you're not. Would that be correct to say?
No.
Or have you always felt you've been suffering in some way physically?
No, I think all of my disabilities are all part of fibro.
Where are your thoughts on your personal suffering today?
I don't really get into a consciousness of suffering.
Right.
I just get into a consciousness of I have to deal with what is going on with me in this moment. Like what particular offshoot of fibro am I dealing with? And as you know, I've been dealing since December.
Yeah.
With chronic fatigue.
Right. But you don't associate suffering with what you're currently going through.
I associate everything now with the actual issue. And just go, okay, my feet are in pain.
Yeah.
It's part of fibro. Plantar fasciitis, whatever. If I have anxiety is part of fibro.
Right.
So I don't even think about suffering anymore.
Right.
I don't think about.
So I just want to clarify, did you think about suffering in earlier years or decades? Did you associate the pain you were in as pure agony and suffering?
Oh, yeah.
And that was a conscious word for you. I am suffering.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I am suffering and I want to die.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
And no, I've talked to you about this before in another episode, and I don't want to be here on the planet anymore. When I tried to commit suicide, right?
Yeah.
And I just didn't want to be on the planet anymore.
Yeah.
I didn't know any other way to leave it.
Right.
So in any event, no, that's a really good question that you just asked me that I just forgot what you asked me.
Well, I asked you if, so we were both, I do want to keep this in the context of suffering, which I hope we have, but I also want to acknowledge that both you and I in earlier decades, you 30 odd years ago, and me 19, acknowledged we were suffering from a life event, health, bereavement. I was suffering. I wasn't even questioning it. And I thought about it for many, many years, and you dealt with it in your way. But the point I'm making is we acknowledged we were suffering.
Yeah.
Brenda assigned no blame for it. I assigned no blame for it. In fact, both of us at some point took responsibility for the creation, the event that happened from our perspective.
Yeah.
When I say I took responsibility, I'm not saying to you, I took responsibility for Janaea choosing her death. No, I understand that was her choice to go, not mine. I'm taking responsibility for being a parent of a child who left me. That's what I'm taking. I only take responsibility for what I am experiencing in my life, not what anybody else is doing. And I long ago, years ago, in fact, at the point of her death, absolutely considered myself a guardian of my children, a mom, for sure, but no control when they reach an age, whatever that age may be, where they're taking autonomy for their actions. I'm not taking responsibility for what they're going to do, but I'm praying to God that I never go through that again. And yes, I did feel responsible and guilty in other ways, but always as I should have been a better mom. I could have been a better mom. I should have done this, just like what we all do. But I wasn't like I made her decide to take her life. No. So I want to be very, 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 very clear about that. So the same with the suffering. I'm suffering. I don't like this feeling. In fact, I can't live like this. I know I won't make it. That was actually it. So same kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I don't think I can make it.
Yeah.
Again, not intending or wanting to end my life myself. I would have never done that, and I'm not wired that way. And I don't even know if it's about being wired. Honestly, I don't know. But I did have some reckless behavior, and I didn't care if something happened to me, such as driving down a country road when no one else was around me on the road, very recklessly, just not wanting to be here. But that, I think, is a natural and normal reaction when we are suffering and can move our body. And a lot of us, I think, just maybe can do stuff like that. Anyway, I was spared having to deal with that. But then again, we have to have something to live for. I have my son. Okay. And so without him, I don't know. He was 13 at the time when his sis died. So I don't know, but I do have him. So that's my reality. And for years and years and years, that's what kept me going. Now I live for me. Okay. Really happy about that. But the point I want to make, bringing this back to the whole suffering thing, we're aware of it. At some point we go, no, I am here either because I really need to be here or I really want to be here, whichever, it's like we're here. So how now is so kind of like you are dealing with, you've got the fibro return, DM maybe, like darn, it's back. Or in my case, I'm a bereaved mom. That's not going to change. Your fibro may not ever change.
Yeah, because I have cleared for it yet, right? Yeah, in all honesty, I don't think it's ever been gone.
Exactly. So exactly like my bereavement, it's never, ever going to be gone. But I can, and here's where we're going to move into this part. I can decide how much I want to suffer or not suffer, which is a good, bulk of my work. That I have been dabbling in or seriously working in about this whole next piece of this, which is how much do I want to suffer? Do I want to suffer at all?
Right.
And when is it time to let it go? Well, that's a personal choice, obviously. But I decided that's when I'm going right back. Right at the beginning, within about, certainly when we went and trained as angel healing practitioners 9 months later, in the April of 2006, I absolutely knew that I was not going to live a life of suffering, and I was going to do everything in my power to overcome it. That's probably not the word I used, but to not suffer anymore. For Janaea, at that fire ritual ceremony, which sounds kind of weird, I know, but it was beautiful. But I had no idea how to do it.
It was a releasing ceremony.
It was a release. It was a fire ceremony, but a release of whatever you wanted to release. And I was releasing, making a commitment to my daughter, making a commitment to Jeanette. At that ceremony, I'm releasing the suffering, but I didn't know how I was going to do it. And I certainly didn't know how long it was going to take me to do it.
Right.
Hence the journey.
Right. And just to elaborate on a releasing ceremony. So when we say it was a fire releasing ceremony, we wrote down on a piece of paper, wanted to release from our consciousness or whatever.
Yeah.
And all went around in a circle and threw it in a in a barrel of fire. So
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. We put a little piece of, paper with our release statement on it and put it around a rock of our choosing. And when it was our time, it was more a procession of 400 people, if you can imagine, to the beat of a drum, and on very, very beautiful, hotel grounds. And it was very powerful, because obviously I think the beating of drums and I think fire are very ritualistic in from our earliest days, and mean different things. But at the point, it was just, we probably also needed the fire for light, but as it was kind of dark. But anyway, and when it was your moment to stand before that, this is all just symbolic stuff, guys, not weird stuff. And, you threw that in, and it was very powerful. It was very, very powerful for all of us, I think, there, whatever we were releasing or making a commitment to change in our life, whatever it was. And for me, I felt like I had taken on a huge, huge undertaking about not wanting to suffer, like ending my suffering. Had no idea how, but as I said, that kickstarted my journey of really putting into practice this commitment and not turning my back on it.
Yeah.
Because, I'll just say this very generally and very broadly here. I believe, based on what is going on in this world and has been going on in this world forever, there is too much suffering. God, there's too much suffering. And I believe that because, as Brenda and I said earlier, we don't really talk a lot about it, I don't think we have enough tools and knowledge and incentives and, the insight, the whatever it takes to get ourselves really out of it. It's kind of like the blind leading the blind, if you will. No disrespect to the blind. Like I had nothing to turn to, nothing for the way I needed and wanted to overcome this horrendous, horrendous suffering. And so this is why we have to find things through like-minded people in communities, our spiritual practice, our faith. It could be just religious faith in the more traditional sense. It's whatever we are drawn to, and finding the different resources along the path that will help us overcome, let go. But there are so many aspects to the letting go piece, largely centered around healing and letting it be okay to be happy and deserving, okay? That can be difficult to stay on that path. And that's where you have to have the motivation and the inspiration and the willpower and a whole bunch of these other things to keep yourself going. And it's really hard if you don't know where you're going. And one of the things I did lose for many, many years, and I'm only kind of getting back, but it's still kind of, not really, is where do I want to go? I don't know. And I have been trying to figure this out for years and years and years and years. And I wish I could talk to somebody about it who has more experience than me, because I do entirely relate this to bereavement, loss of my identity that shattered who I had been. And so finding out who I am, but more importantly, who I want to be, it's kind of like, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I was talking to a bereaved mom last year, had her on my show, and she said the same thing, and we laughed about it. I think we were talking personally, and I can't remember if we said it in the podcast episode, but we laughed about it because that's exactly what it feels like. Your gap year from grade 12 to university, which of course they do in Europe, and we don't really do it in North America, but the same kind of idea, but it's an extended period. And that has been my biggest, I think, looking back, my biggest challenge. And the suffering didn't help, because suffering keeps you, it can keep you hopeless, right? You got to dig deep to get yourself out of it, right?
Yeah.
So I want to jump head to right now to, because we're probably getting to the top of the hour here. I want to jump ahead a little bit to just sort of when to let go, up to you.
But I think the critical moment and the letting go happens when we make the conscious decision. You don't want to suffer anymore. I don't want to suffer anymore. Absolutely. You think that? Oh, it has to be, I believe it has to be a conscious decision.
Yeah. You have to be aware of it.
Exactly. Because it's like, even with wanting to heal my body, it had to be a conscious commitment.
Yeah.
This is what I'm doing.
Yeah. So I do want to just sum up a little bit what we said just before I got into that last little diatribe there. When we say, well, so you still live with fibro, I still am bereaved, not going to change. It might for you in your lifetime. Me, never. Once bereaved, always bereaved. But we don't look at suffering. Well, we're not suffering. I'm not suffering at all, folks. And actually, I can't tell you when it ended. It was more like an osmosis of just accepting Janae's death, my girl's death. And I hate to say it, but I have to say it, being okay with it. And I know I might get some feedback on that, and that's taken years for me to actually, and when I say like, I'm okay with it, what I mean by that is I'm not happy she left me. No, but I've never been mad at her, never. But I have to be okay that it happened in my life, which could be just another way of saying I've accepted it. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. I would say, otherwise I can't go on. I can't go on positively if I never reach that point.
It's a choice. You've made a choice to accept.
I have to, but it took years. And so that voice really is just really that I've been comfortable with it. Because there's a difference between saying I accept that it happened, but still being miserable, and going, I accept what's happened. I'm not going to let this take me down. And I'm going to find a way. So here's where I'm at. So I'm going to find a way to fully embrace life and all the beautiful opportunities and as much joy and love as I can embrace and want to feel, because I believe that's a choice too, how much we want to feel goodness.
Yeah.
And give myself permission to understand this is a journey, what I'm undertaking, and I'm just proud of the point that I am proud of myself because of the point I've been able to reach, where I'm experiencing a lot of that in my life and have been for, I would say, the last several months, consciously, not trying to force myself, just really allowing myself to authentically let the light shine through me and just be very accepting of this bereavement and not attach any misery to it anymore. And I started about a year or two ago celebrating me on Janae's birthday and angel anniversary for going through this together, knowing she's way more free than I am, but kind of making it a little bit more lighthearted and going, yeah, catch you later. I know I'm the one lagging behind here in this human body, a little bit more heavy. And as I always say, this corporeal mess that I'm sometimes composed of. Well, not really, but you know what I mean? This heaviness, this weight. But I was glad to be your mom. So glad to be your mom. Now, other people might reach this and there's not a race, other people might reach this like a year, 6 months. It really depends on a loss, how you lost your loved one, if your child, where you're at. But for me, I'm just talking about my suffering, right? This one really, really has just about took me down. And so to recover from that and let it go, right? This is my authentic. I don't do anything half-assed. It has to be all or nothing for me. And that for me is my authenticity. And if I can't really mean it and I can't really feel it, I'm a work in progress. And this might be where I am at until the day I transition. And I'm okay with that too, that I don't have to be this perfect being. But I had to change my relationship with my daughter. In other words, I had to change the kind of relationship I needed to have with her now in spirit, rather than being her mom and just missing her all the time, celebrating her in spirit and celebrating our paths together, and where it's taken me, knowing that she's eons beyond this. You understand what I mean? But in my human brain, I can still, thanks, hon. I know other bereaved parents got their way before me. And again, I'm saying this isn't a race, but understanding this can happen for other people. They can experience healing. Maybe someone's, gone through something much faster than we have. And our natural tendency is to compare ourselves a little bit, right? And you just can't do that, because this is a very personal commitment when we are acknowledging our suffering. And then when we are saying, I don't want to suffer, you're only making a commitment to yourself if you want to let it go, right? Your thoughts? We're coming to a close on this, but we'll end on your thoughts on all that I just said,
Well, I think that suffering is a part of the earthly dimension. And that as long as we have a human condition, I think we learn through suffering. And that what you were saying before about the world, I can't remember exactly, but
it's full of suffering.
Yeah, it's full of suffering. And I really feel that it's once we become enlightened about that, it is our own choice on how we want to live our life and how we want to change anything in our life that isn't working for us. This is not a responsibility of any other individual. If you're in a family situation, or like myself in a single situation, it's nobody's responsibility to make me happy or not suffer or whatever. And it's completely my choice if I want to experience those things. And so just like with you live in a family situation, but you understand that you are the only one that can change you.
I know.
Your husband can't change you. Your son can't change you. Nobody in your life, I can't change you. No. Right? It's a choice that comes from within.
Yeah. That
finally I say to myself, however I'm dealing with my health is has to come from a place that I can accept.
Yeah.
That I'm making a choice about it.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm very, very grateful. I don't feel at all that I'm suffering with anything that's going on in my health situation.
Yeah, no, I love what you said. You're just dealing with things that come up and, this happens.
Yeah, right.
And deal with it.
I'm not my inner soul or my back or whatever.
Yeah.
I have to sleep or whatever. I just deal with it. And I don't get mad at the process.
Right.
Or anything. It's going on with my, it's what's happening to me. However, I also take full responsibility that I am creating what's going on in my world, in my body. Like nobody, it hasn't happened because I slipped on a curb or something like this, right? Well, it would have been my choice to have slipped on the curb, but I'm just saying. So I just want to leave the thought that through my own empowerment of my thoughts, whatever I choose to focus on is what I will create. And through that creation is what I will manifest. And I will have to deal with whatever it is that is going on in my world. It's not the responsibility of any other person or a practitioner or whatever, right, to heal me.
And that's actually a really good point. Because the thing is, when we suffer, it is also easy to blame others for what's happening to us. Yeah. And that is an episode all on its own.
Yeah.
And it is in my view and experience in having been working with clients over the years, and so on, and learning from the angels. My goodness, for every piece of assistance you give a client through the angels, you learn yourself, because the messages are always very universal. But I will say that a huge part of suffering and that mentality of suffering, I think we are largely taught it because of it being so widespread, but also without, a focus on self-responsibility and awareness for being responsible for our lives, being responsible for our creations, a step up, having the autonomy, as it were, to be better and choose better than experiencing pain and hardship when we really don't have to. And here's the thing, is that when you make a decision to not suffer, to not be broke, to not be unhappy, to have more of this, to have more of that, to have more of whatever it is, okay? And this can take years in a practice to actually embrace it. It can also be instant. It really is all in the mind and what we are willing to accept at any one time in terms of goodness and worth and deservingness. It can just be like flipping a switch.
Oh, I was going to say it could be instantaneous.
Yeah, and second. Yeah, right. The minute you're just like, and so then that begs the question, which we don't have time to ponder and ask today, is well, do we suffer, and is there extended periods of suffering until we reach that point when we understand our deservingness? Another show. But one I contemplate for others. I don't think I've had a huge problem with that so much, but I definitely had a problem for years about deserving to be happy, and the conflict, the contrast with the grief and mourning my child. Right? Well, what does that mean? If I'm happy, did her death not matter? And so we often suffer to express how much we loved someone, or atonement, or any other combination of reasons that ultimately is wrapped up in it's proving to someone else or something else, just ourselves even, that we aren't deserving because of, whether it's regret or guilt or, all that. So there is that whole, path to explore. But I promise you, when you decide, I've had enough of this, suffering could just be in a bad relationship, and you're tired of it. It could be really bad things too. But when we make that decision and that break in our mind, I'm done. You'll know it. Yeah. So all I'm going to say is you'll know it when you're done. Yeah. Right? Absolutely. Right. All right. So you know what? We've gone on. I know this is kind of long-winded, and hopefully there's some jewel pieces in there for both you and I to pick up when we re-listen to it on our own. Mm. And for you as the audience, to think about in your own life and come up with other stuff on your own. It's always the curiosity that helps us through this. I'm currently going to leave you with the idea that I have been completely struck by, the Buddhist insight of suffering is an illusion. I am not a Buddhist. I reconnected with, obviously, a lifetime in the past as a Buddhist monk, and in January, and that is leading me actually to an extended time in Southeast Asia at the end of this year. And I hope I will be far more enlightened to understand and really live. Suffering is an illusion when I come back. And meantime, I will be doing Tales from Asia to keep you updated on that progress. Again, and just another little piece for me in my overall life plan and what I want to achieve. And that's about all I know. I know nothing else. Just that I have a plane ticket. When my husband's going. Anyway, a huge topic, right? As I say, I hope I left you with some tidbits. So we'll be coming back in the next part, 12. And I'll tease you a little bit. Brenda and I are going to be talking about the small I am. small I-am versus the I-am all caps. And what the difference is, how to know it, how to live it, and experience both in your life when it comes to intending and manifesting, creating that perfect life you do want. And yes, life can be perfect, right? It sure can. Anything else you want to add to end this one today?
No, it's great. It's been wonderful.
Time for try. Oh, yeah. Try. Anyway, hey, thanks for listening. Yeah. Thanks for watching.
Yeah.
We appreciate it. We appreciate it. We love you guys, and are really glad you're on the journey with us in some way. So until next time, we are the Soul Sisters. See you again.
Bye.